So, the importance of community synchrony and locally led disaster management, presented by Maggie Grable. So, immediately after a natural disaster, media attention increases visibility of the event, bringing in outsiders to bring support to the people who are affected by this. However, long-term impacts are usually seen after public attention has already shifted away, and thus usually the local governments or state governments will have to deal with the long-term effects by themselves. Item donations, while in good faith, often cannot be reasonably processed and actually may harm relief efforts by distracting volunteers from doing more important work like search and rescue. Charities can also make communities dependent on them if they're the only ones who can help, as if communities cannot be self-sufficient, then they won't be able to recover after the event. And if individuals cut losses after a disaster, then the community will lose resources and the local feel of help from their community. So essentially, outsiders should be educated by the media on how to effectively assist affected communities, and community members in disaster-prone areas should be trained beforehand in basic search and rescue, first aid, and mental health support to help become resources for their communities. So first we have donations and resources. When a person hears about a disaster on the media, one of the first things they think is to donate clothes or possibly toys to the people who are affected by the area to help with the relief efforts. However, this strains the already limited resources and volunteers available at the site. With infrastructure damage in the area, it's usually going to be already taken over by other people who are trying to bring in effective help. There's a limited transportability to bring those items in the first place, whether or not they're effective in helping people or not. And physical item distribution will either not be able to occur or will distract from more important relief efforts. Long-term effects are usually addressed after the immediate attention has shifted, usually in the environmental effects, business reopenings, full infrastructure repair, and the regrowing of crops in the area. For example, the 2020 Australian bushfires were incredibly publicized worldwide and received lots of support, but with the 65,000 square miles of land burnt, it doubled Australia's carbon emissions that year. Now, with those extra carbon emissions, the average temperature will rise in the future, and it may lead to more droughts, which would lead to future fires, which could be worse than the one already happened. During a disaster event, people in a community really need to come together, as if people cut their losses, there will be a loss of skills and resources that the community members feel together. However, the training of Citizen Emergency Management Response Teams, or CERT training, can prepare people for disaster response and may make people more willing to rebuild because they feel they can have a genuine positive impact on their communities' relief efforts. Currently, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, provides temporary housing to people who are affected by a disaster. However, people must go to apply to them. And there's a whole process that I'll explain in the next slide. And while CERT training exists, there is a limited degree of it so that it definitely could be improved. You see the steps here. There's first an interview, installation, sometimes even a second background check, and then finally installation of movement of the unit. And when people they've already lost their home, they have to deal with the stresses of taking care of their families, all these steps are just unnecessary for people who just need immediate support and relief. Okay, solutions. 1, outsiders should follow the guide of local people that have already been established. For example, local soup kitchens, rebuilding efforts, and search and rescue. In particular, search and rescue, having local knowledge could be very important, as, say, they'd be like, oh, the person on the other side of town, they didn't get checked on. Let's make sure they're safe. So if people have local knowledge of things that larger organizations might overlook, that could really help to make sure everyone is safe after disaster. And by playing a more important role in their own relief efforts, the community feels more important and together. So, the media needs to educate outsiders on what they can do to efficiently and effectively help local people during a disaster, with either monetary donations or specifically requested physical items. As larger charity organizations, they may have, if you donate to them, they might have to lose some of that contribution to their own overheads with their employees and possibly other disasters that are happening in the same country. Media can also help remind of long-term reminders or updates of the situation. So like the bushfires, they can say, hey, this is still going on, here's how you can help. Stuff like that. Media can help with general public education, fundraising, social support for affected people, damage report, and more. And finally, a significant population being trained in CERT, search and rescue, first aid, mental health support, and more can help improve the disaster recovery response. However, it could be difficult to have an effectively large population be trained in this, as there is a time commitment they need to be effectively trained, and necessary fees for the training may dissuade some people from trying to participate. So having the government recognize the benefits of having a local citizen team to respond to disasters, and then funding programs like these could really help with immediate disaster recovery. Dunzo.
How would you select the strategy you use to gather information or conduct research, and were they effective?
I would always, whatever search engine I use multiple search engines, and I would always, before I decided to use the source, I would validate the author's credibility, and there's usually like a biography in each of the ones. So it's like, this person has a PhD in natural disaster recovery or something like that. So I would always check to make sure that they were credible in their field, and when I was looking through databases, I would do like natural disaster community, natural disaster government, whatever the thing that I wanted to specialize in was the best way of finding the response for that specific kind.
How does your conclusion respond to any of the other research or sources that you have
Not a lot, but like some of the articles that I looked at, they included in their conclusion section, they would have, here's what we can do to further our research, here's what we can do to like help us. So I would expand upon those things that they suggested. Like, they're like, we need to have more CERT training. Well, they might have not gone into detail for that, so I would look for other sources and go more in depth for each of the things that they suggested to bring everything together for the final conclusion.